Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Senior to Seniors podcast. Today, I have a special guest that comes from the area where I grew up in Iowa, and we're going to talk to Roger LaBarge about his life and his book. And you can see my background that I have, and this is actually the front cover of the book that he authored last year called The Prisoner. The Prisoner is a book that I finished a couple weeks ago. It's available just about everywhere. If you go to Amazon, probably is the easiest place to find his book. Or if you happen to catch Roger at one of the many places where he plays music, I know he has his book with him available to sell. He also has, I believe, 23 CDs that he's done. So Roger's a pretty accomplished musician, and I've thought of him as almost a poet because he's written so many songs, and the lyrics are meaningful lyrics, and we'll talk about that today. But I want to give Roger a proper introduction. You can see Roger on the screen if you're on YouTube, and but let me. It's kind of long, but he deserves a great introduction. So I want to read this. I put this together last night, and I hope it fits. So today's guest is a man whose life reads like a novel, sounds like a song, and inspires like a testimony of pure resilience. Roger LaBarge has spent more than 70 years as a musician and guitar teacher, guiding children and adults of every age into the joy of music. He's a lifelong performer, and today he plays alongside his daughter Mandy as the LaBarge Father and Daughter Duo, a partnership filled with heart, storytelling, and generational healing. But Roger's journey goes far deeper than the stage that people see him on. He is the author of the powerful autobiography, The Prisoner, a raw and unfiltered account of a life marked by addiction, theft, incarceration, wandering, and loss. Born in 1949, Roger takes readers through 7 decades, starting in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, sharing the painful truths of a troubled youth, years of battling substances, mistakes that cost him dearly, and the consequences that followed him for decades. Yet The Prisoner is not a story about darkness. It's far from that. It's a story of redemption. It reveals how music became his lifeline, how songwriting helped him make sense of the world, how the love of family and friends pulled him out of the places he once thought he'd never escape, and how the decision to live sober, intentional, and free changed the entire course of his life. Beyond the pages of his book, Roger's storytelling continues through his songs, musical journeys about river life, Midwest legends, family characters, motorcycles, catfish tales, the Mississippi, and the unforgettable people who shaped the landscapes of Iowa and beyond. A Roger and Mandy LaBarge show feels like stepping into a living storybook, part truth, part fiction, and all heart. Roger, thank you so much for being with me today.
Well, thank you, Jim, for the introduction, and thank you for having me.
I'm so glad to have you. And the reason I have you is because you're 76 years old. I'm 71. We're not too far apart. My show, as I had mentioned to you, is intended for seniors and talks about senior issues and stories of seniors. And your story, I believe, while it is very unique and it's one that takes you through a whirlwind, it's not unlike a lot of seniors, maybe some seniors that are listening to this who can identify with your journey, who can understand the years that you went through this and will love hearing your story. So let me start out with this, Roger. Open your early life. You were born in an army tent in at Fort Des Moines in Des Moines, Iowa. You grew up mostly in Cedar Rapids. And so when you think back to those early years, what were the what were the sounds? What were the experience that first drew you towards music?
Okay, well, um, I I was born in an army tent. Now, if you look at my birth certificate, it says Broadlawns in Des Moines. But my grandma told me, and my dad too, that when you were born in the army tents, they would take you right away to the hospital, and that's where you would get your birth certificate. But
Uh-huh.
I was born in an army tent there. And now, as far as my music goes, my grandmother raised me. I was
Hmm.
taken down and dropped off of my grandma's, so to say, on the doorstep, and she raised me. She, I started listening to Lawrence Welk when I was
Hmm.
really young with her because she loved to watch Lawrence Welk and she loved the accordion. So when I was 6 years old, she gave me a choice. She told me, I want you to play music. And she said, I either want you to play the drums, because she liked the drums too, or the accordion. And she took me down to Boddicker School of Music and let me pick out the instrument I wanted. And when that accordion case opened and I saw all those keys and neat things, that's when I decided I wanted to play. So,
Yeah,
um,
and it's funny, yeah, because the accordion, Boddicker's, Cedar Rapids,
oh, that's
uh,
it.
right? And there was, a pretty famous musician from Owine, my hometown, Leo Grieco, that
Yes.
that settled in Cedar Rapids, and of course had a show on WNT radio, uh, and it featured his accordion. So that totally hits home with me because a lot of kids were, either they chose it or they were forced into it. I can see pictures. There's a picture in Leo's restaurant in Owine, an Italian restaurant in Owine, and it's a picture of a bunch of kids, and they all have accordions
We all got
because,
accordion.
especially in Italian culture, that was an affordable instrument where they didn't have room for pianos, couldn't afford a piano, and
Yes.
so you started on the accordion. Um,
Yeah.
and you listened to Lawrence Welk, and many of us didn't have a choice, right? I mean,
That's it. I listened to Lawrence Welk, and and my grandma played piano too. See, so every day I would come home. I didn't take a lesson once or twice a week. Every day when I came home from school,
wow.
first thing she did was set me down, and I had to take my lesson. And but now one thing that was kind of neat about Boddickers became a home to me. They were like a family to me, and I actually started my first teaching when I started teaching was at Boddickers. But Ronnie DeWitt, the famous Ronnie DeWitt from Cedar Rapids, it's in the Hall of Fame and stuff. He started about the same time I did at Boddickers. And the one thing I really remember that always got me was Ronnie would come in and have that guitar, this Fender guitar, and the case would open up. And I love the look of that guitar and the way the case smelled.
I
So
was just going to say that. I was just going to say it. How do you remember the smell?
I remember the smell of what
Yeah,
it
yeah,
smelled like in
yeah,
the case and stuff, and I just loved it. And so the guitar had an effect on me early, and I became really good friends with Ronnie DeWitt, and I went to school with him and stuff. But you know, so the guitar kind of had an effect on me even when I was playing the accordion. You know,
yeah.
and I played the accordion until I was about, my grandpa died when I was 9, and I was raised in a real poor section of Cedar Rapids called Time Check. And I lived right down in the real poor part of it. And when my grandpa died, well, I'd say not long after that, a couple of years after that, I started running the streets. I could do just about anything I
Yeah,
wanted to do. So I only
yeah.
played accordion until I was about 13 or 14 years old. And then I had some really great black friends. I went to work. I lied about my age and got a job at the Roosevelt Hotel doing busboy stuff and met a couple black people that taught me how to dance, taught me how to sing Motown. And, I fell in love with that stuff. I ran around with these black kids that I just loved. They were like brothers and sisters to me. And so I got really, really into the Motown and all that kind of stuff. And then, from the book that I ran out to California eventually, fell in love with the guitar music, and so then I started playing guitar. But
Yeah.
now I need to mention really early on, like you said, what made me fall the stuff that I really liked the music about was, well, that got me into the music. There was a few people I need to mention their names: Dennis McMurrin, Rod Dickinson, Danny Orhus, Ron and Craig DeWitt, Louis Carr, if you've ever heard the name before,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Doug Case, and Dickie Douglas were probably the ones that had the biggest effect on me as far as playing guitar goes. Taught me stuff, and I either listened to them and loved the way they played, or I actually got to be friends with them, and they taught me
So
music.
those were, other than Lawrence Welk and your grandmother, you had a lot of influences that
A
a
lot of
lot of kids at that time didn't have, especially uh, with black friends.
yes, oh
Because,
yes,
right? Because
yes.
at that time, we're talking 1965, I suppose,
Oh yeah,
around.
I had some wonderful black friends that I danced. I went to Danceland with, danced all the time. I won dance contests in Danceland, and
Yeah,
I sang like crazy, My Girl, and all that kind of stuff. And
sure. Yeah.
so when I wasn't playing the guitar, when I stopped playing the accordion, until I started playing the guitar when I was 18, early 19 years old, I didn't stop the music. I kept dancing and singing, and
Well, it's always been part of your life. You couldn't
yes,
get away from it, right?
right.
And so, you've been teaching guitar for years. You've had so many students, and I'm guessing you've had students that are both young and you've had seniors, older people as well. Um,
Yes,
Tell me what you've learned from your students. You told me what you learned from, the friends around you who influence you. But,
right, right.
I know when I taught, I learned, I think, more from my students than they learned from me. Sometimes I felt guilty,
Oh,
right?
that's great. That's great. Yes, yes. But yeah, my students can make me cry. They have made me
Uh,
cry. I mean, I love my students. I love to teach. I love my students, and they've taught me to believe, really believe in the music I
mhm.
teach, and they just gave me so many rewards over the years. And taught me that you're never too old to learn. I don't know if
Yeah,
that makes any sense or not, but
total
they
sense. Yeah.
taught me so many things. It made me feel this big when I get them doing stuff and they go and do things and win awards and do all kinds of different stuff. It just makes me feel this big. I feel
Yeah.
fulfilled.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally understand. So, well, let's get into the nitty gritty. Let's get into
Okay,
the book.
okay,
Okay, your book, The Prisoner, is really an autobiography, a memoir, if you will. It reads almost like a diary because everything is sequenced. You take people through your early life. I mean, you take people from when you were born in Des Moines all
hmm
the way to today,
hmm
and
yes,
you do it chronologically. I mean, step by step, and so the book is so totally honest. What made you decide to write something that is just so downright honest? Uh, and I know how hard it is. I wrote a book, and there's things that I said in the book that were really revealing about me. And gosh, this book opens everything up. You didn't
yes.
hide anything. So, what made you decide to write the book?
Well, um, I decided to write the book because so many people over the years told me, would tell me, man, you need to write a book. You need to
Yeah,
write a book about your life. My God, and I tell stories and stuff when I'm playing my music and everything. They said, man, you need to write a book. Your stories are
yeah,
just amazing. You should write a book. Well, that didn't really, I thought about that and thought about it, but then there are so many stories told about me over the years that either the story wasn't told right, wasn't, or was an outright lie, or, finally, all that stuff just kind of got to me. And I decided over 5 years ago that, well, I think it's time, to set the record straight. I feel like I could do it now. And I feel like I can do it. So I'm going to start writing this book. So I started it not even really knowing if I was going to be able to finish it. But
Hmm.
I did finish it, and I just worked at it and worked at it. And I knew I had, I was lucky enough to have the kind of life I had, even though it was unbelievable life,
Yeah.
uh, ups and downs. But that living that kind of life gave me the stuff that I could write a great book about, I thought.
Oh, and it is. I mean, reading your book, Roger, it's almost like this this can't be true. Um,
But it
this
was.
guy, this guy is off the rails. No, wait a second, he's back. Oh, wait a second, he did this. Oh, his grandmother gave him a guitar, so that's good. He's going to be better. Oh my God, he's been taken down by drugs. So, revisiting the chapters in your book, you talk about addiction, you talk about how theft affected your life, how incarceration affected your life, personal loss that you had, because that couldn't have been easy as well. My gosh, how did you emotionally navigate those years? How did you get to here without being dead? I
Well,
mean,
yeah,
I,
that's a
you know,
miracle. That's a
yeah,
miracle,
yeah,
an absolute miracle. And I believe, after, now being here and writing the book and stuff, I believe my life was meant to be like that. That's why you have the book. That's why
uh-huh,
you were able to read it. I
uh-huh,
think I was meant that, if I hadn't lived that life, I wouldn't be able to write this book. Um, it did hurt me deeply when I was writing it at times.
yeah,
Hurt
yeah,
me, to write and live through some of this pain that I've went through. But it also made me really proud and happy that I made it.
yeah,
I made it. I
yeah.
was able I was able to use the key, unlock the door, say no, and I made it. I'm free, and I had to go through a lot to get there, but I did it.
Oh gosh, yeah, yeah. And without all the things that are in the book that you lived, okay, they're not just in a book. I mean, you live this stuff. Uh, the material that you have for your songs and the way you write, uh, you know, the color of your music and the way it comes out, the grit and the melodies are all affected by your life. And it talks about so many challenges. And so I know, Roger, many of my listeners who are seniors have seen their own share of challenges. Maybe not to the degree of yours, but we've all faced challenges. So, what part of your story do you hope resonates, with people like in my audience? What are you hoping that when people read the book that they take from it?
Well, there'd be a few things. For one thing, they never need to stop giving up on themselves. You can't give up on yourself, and you need to learn to love yourself. That's God. That is really, really super important. And you want to remember your past. You've got to remember your past. Some people say, I don't ever want to remember my past. Well, let me tell you, you need to remember your past. If you had a rough past, don't forget your past. But you got to let go. You got to
Yeah,
let go of it, and you've got to move on. And you have to forgive yourself. You've got to be able to forgive yourself. Maybe you did some really bad stuff, but you got to be able to forgive yourself. That's over with. It's done. You've got a new life. That's the only way you can heal is if you do that. And you have to be able to forgive others, other
mm,
people. If there's people that have wronged you and stuff like that, you've got to be able to forgive them and stuff. And the most important thing of all, well, you have to love your family. You want to love your family and your friends every day. You should try to say, I love you as much as you can every day. It's so important.
Yeah.
But the main thing is you have to realize no matter what it is that has happened to you with your life or what you're going through or whatever it is, which you're the boss. You're the boss. If you forgot that, you're the boss. You have the key. The key that it means everything. That key unlocks the prison you're in and sets you free. All you have to do is use it. You've got to be able to say no.
Yeah.
That's what you've got to be able to do is say no to whatever it is that if you have an addiction or you have problems or something like that. You just got to be able to use that key and set yourself free. It's the most important thing there is.
Well,
And
and if anybody would understand the power of unlocking the door, of having the key, I think you would. You can talk on it.
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I wished I would have found it so much earlier in
Well,
my
you
life
found
than
it.
I did. But I did find it. Yes.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
took me a while, but I did.
And you've got, a supporting family. You have Kathy, your wife, who's been with you for a long time, and you've got Mandy, who, you have the pleasure of being able to share music with, to play music together. And I do that with one of my sons and my daughter, and there's nothing quite like that. But Roger, you talk about that in your book. You say that you'll always be a prisoner of your past. Tell me what that means.
Well, what that means to me is that, you know, there's no matter what I do, no matter how many good things I do, or how much I've changed my life, or tried, it seems like uh, you know, I've I don't get in any trouble. I'm a good man. I've changed my life. No matter what, or even no matter what's been wrote in my book or anything else, there's always going to be people that will never forgive me,
Hmm.
will never let go, and I will never be anything but bad to them.
Hmm.
I'm the bad guy. I'm the
Yeah.
guy in a lot of trouble, and I'm a bad guy, and I'm never going to be any different.
Yeah.
That's the way it is. I can't change.
Yeah. But
And
you're not who you were.
no,
You're not who you were, and I can understand that. Uh, People have a hard time letting go. People who you might have hurt, and it's tough to let go. But with the prisoner of your past, you know that you're living a clean, stable, and sober life now. And isn't that what it's all about?
that's what it's all about. And that's absolutely what it's all about. And, like that prisoner of your past, like you were saying, I can't get away from that. I did too much, I just was messed up too many times. I went to prison a number of times from this addiction that I had, this terrible addiction. And I can't get away from that. I was a prisoner, and I was a prisoner to that poison, and it's always going to make me a prisoner to my past, no matter what, because there's going to be people that'll never forget that and will never, they will never look at me
Hmm.
differently than how I was back then.
Do you have a song with that title?
I have a song called "The Prisoner." Yes,
Do you have one called
I
"I'm
have
a
a whole
Prisoner to the
CD.
Past"?
Hmm?
Yeah, and I've got the CD
Yes,
as well.
yes.
Have you ever written a song called I'll always be a prisoner of my past"?
No, but I have some that are very close that are about that, like paying dues.
Uh-huh.
Paying dues
Yeah,
is all about that, you know.
sure. Yeah,
Um, and there's
yeah,
several songs. There's several songs. I could write one like that. I
yeah,
surely could write one with that title. But I have them like that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Well, you
paying
need
dues.
to. You need to
Especially,
write one with that title. How many songs have you written, Roger?
well, I've written over 600 original songs.
Yeah. And, I was talking to a mutual friend yesterday about you. And, we're talking about your book and your music and so forth. And I said, something that I'd really like to have from Roger is a different kind of a book. And from listening to his music, um, the lyrics are what it's about. I'm not a music critic by any sense of the imagination, but I thought of the lyrics that you wrote very much like those that Bob Dylan would write. Bob Dylan doesn't have the greatest voice in the world, right? I mean,
That's
his
right. That's right. Yeah.
okay, but it's his lyrics, the stories that he tells. And I said to this person, at some point, I hope that you publish something that has those 400 song lyrics in them
I
because
have
I
thought
think,
about that. That's really surprising you would say that because I've been thinking about that. I've thought
well,
about doing that.
I mean, they're very poetic. They tell a story, and um, anyhow, I would love to be able to read something like that if you ever do it. But so let's talk about forgiveness for a second. What role do you think forgiveness of yourself and others play in your healing journey? Because man, you have been on a healing journey since you were born.
Well, like I said, I had to forgive myself. I
Yeah.
had to forgive myself. Like I told you, it hurt me bad writing this book sometimes of some of the things that I did, to my friends and my family. I would just about do anything to
Uh-huh.
get one high one more time, and that
Yeah.
kind of stuff hurt me deeply to write it and stuff. And I could sit and wallow in that stuff and just, think about it and think about it and be sad all the time. But I'm not going to do that. I'm not there anymore. I'm just
Yeah.
not. I forgive myself. I forgave
Wow.
myself a long time ago. I had to let go and
Yeah.
forgive myself. You know, I'm not that man anymore. I'm a
Yeah.
good man. And
So where did your life, what's the turning point in your life? I mean, so much of your book reads where you were bad, Roger. You
no, I
were
was bad.
yeah, you were
I was
bad.
bad.
And,
I was
and
I was addicted to a terrible, terrible drug, and it just would make me crazy.
so at what point did your life change? Was it incarceration?
No,
Is,
that didn't stop. I almost died
okay.
several times, and that didn't stop it.
Okay.
There was a couple of changes in my life. One of them, I would say, the first time I started to know I was changing someone was when I left Cedar Rapids and I
Mhm.
went to Chicago on an out-of-state parole, and everything was gone that I had. My family, everything that I had in Cedar Rapids, all my ties, everything. I went to Chicago and I started playing music there. I was in two different duels there, and I met my wife.
Mhm.
You know, everything started to change for me there. But then, if you read the book, you know, my life takes another bad turn just because, like you asked me earlier, of my past, of being a prisoner of my past. My life takes another terrible bad turn, and which is unbelievable. It makes me a fugitive for 17 years of my
Well,
life.
talk about that. What was that bad turn?
Well, I lived with my wife, and I met my wife, and we weren't married yet, but we lived together,
Mhm.
and she had three kids, and one of the kids got hurt, and to make this long story short, they came after me for it. You know,
Mhm.
they her well, first of all, her folks um, didn't like me because her dad used to be a policeman,
Okay.
and he knew that they did a check on me and knew that I had a bunch of felonies on my record and stuff, and so they didn't want their daughter with me. So before you know it, they're thinking of different ways to get me away from their daughter. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
not have me in their life. And so before you know it, they're sending the welfare. She has 3 kids, and they're sending the welfare out to the house and saying that I'm mistreating the kids. And then one thing leads to the next. One of the kids get hurt, and they come after me for it,
Mm-hmm.
accuse me of it. And before you know it, I'm in this unbelievable kangaroo court thing in Indiana, and they're trying to give me like 42 years. I escaped from there, and I'm a fugitive for 17 years.
So literally, everybody who's listening, you literally escaped, and your escape
Absolutely
is
escaped
that's almost unbelievable. You escaped from a courtroom,
from a
right?
courtroom. Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you're being tried for something you didn't do, and I even
Something I didn't do.
yeah, and the child who was supposed to have been abused by you even said
Oh,
they weren't
absolutely said that I
right.
didn't do this and stuff. Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
And
but
they,
your past overtook everything. It's he's got to be guilty, and
oh,
so
yeah, I had to be guilty, you see,
so the
because I had,
story the story is you ran out of the courtroom and you took off. I did you steal a car when you took off? I
no,
think.
no, no, no. What they did was they they went out and came back in. This was in, you got to remember, this is in Porter County, Indiana, which
Uh-huh.
actually is like, you know, terrible, crooked place for,
Yeah.
especially back then, and they'll still say today. But you really didn't want to get arrested in Indiana and Porter County or any place like that. Um, but they had this, the court is the trial was just you wouldn't believe what it was like. And then they go out, they come back in, and they say that I'm guilty. Okay, and when they do that, and my wife and I had a funny feeling about this anyway. Kathy and I did. We were kind of talking about it before, but when they do that, then they're going to go back and see. This is what really got me convicted to begin with, was that I had all these felonies on my record for shoplifting and burglary and stuff like that when I was all
Yeah.
strung out on drugs. And so they had just made a new law in Indiana that if you had so many felonies on your record, then they could charge you with what was called the habitual criminal and give you 30 years just for having those felonies on your record. So now they had to send the jury back in to have them deliberate to see if they wanted to find me guilty of this habitual criminal thing. When they did that, they let Kathy and I go out and sit in the hallway. And when they let me go out and sit in the hallway, we had already talked about this. You know, I gave her a big kiss and hug and went down the back stairs, went out, got in my van, and drove away.
You drove in your van. Okay.
My
Well,
van,
poor
yeah.
poor Kathy. Good Lord. Um, and and
She's
and then you took off, and I don't want to tell the whole story here.
no,
Uh,
you got to read the book.
I know you got because there's so much more. We don't have time to cover it all. You took off, and uh, you, oh gosh, one thing leads to another. But there's a point where you change your name. Okay,
Yes, we
and
changed. I changed my name.
this
Yes,
is
yes,
moving on. All right,
yes.
because
Moving
you're
on.
you're you're an escaped felon,
Yes,
I guess, and so you changed your name. And and I want to touch on this briefly as part of the story because I think it's kind of funny and it shows me how everything connects with you and I connect today and with other things. So you chose the name Hallberg or Hellberg
Hellberg, Halberg, which is
and
like my
why?
good friend. Well, it's the reason I got that name was because I had a couple of birth certificates gave to me from my half sister, little half sister, and she, that we used those to change our name. So
And so you had to have a name, and so it just so happens that that's the name
yeah,
you chose, and that's what was handy. right?
Yes, and she had got her hands on these birth certificates from some other kids that she ran around with. She was just a young teenager, and you know, they were breaking into houses or whatever, and they had, they had these birth certificates, and um, there were social security numbers there too, I believe, the social security cards. But
Yeah,
so
yeah,
so we used those, and that's how we changed our names and stuff. And now your question you'd asked me was, when did I know my life changed? Well,
yeah,
we used those, and we end up eventually in Minnesota. We live in for 15 years in Minnesota, just regular old normal lives. I mean, I worked, and Mandy and I played music. We won one talent contest. Mandy started playing music with me when she was 3 years old. She won her first, or she played her first concert with me in kindergarten. But when I knew, I still didn't really. I feel that what you had asked me in the question, when you knew your life really changed. When I
yeah.
knew my life really, really changed was when they finally arrested me again. After 17 years of being a fugitive, we get arrested finally again. And they take us back to Indiana. And we go to Indiana, and lo and behold, after all this time, we didn't know this, but after all this time, they have found out that, I didn't do this. And the kid that did this had killed himself, and I end up getting hardly any time. They give me a year. The reason they gave me a year in Indiana was because I had been found guilty um, back in the day, and
Uh-huh.
the judge had to sentence me. Luckily, the laws had changed, and they weren't using that 30-year thing where they had to give you 30 years. They were using a thing where they could enhance your sentence three times whatever the judge would give you. And so what I end up with is a year in prison over there in Indiana, and then I'm set free. Kathy comes and picks me up with Mandy. We go back to our house in Harper's Ferry, and that's when everything changed for me.
Harper's
That's when
Ferry,
I
Iowa.
knew. That's when I knew I actually was Roger LaBarge again, and excuse me. And it took me, believe it or not, it took me a number of years, even though I was Roger LaBarge again. It took me a few years, and this is what's going to happen with anyone else that quits a long addiction process. It took me a number of years to figure out who I really was, because I never ever was really myself. I
Yeah,
started doing drugs when I was 13 years old, and I didn't stop until, I spent years and years and years doing them. So I never really had a real life, even though I played music, was married, did all this other stuff. I never lived the normal life of, having hobbies, or going out to eat, or, you
hmm,
know, doing family things, stuff like that. All of that started for me when I finally got my real name back, and started living as Roger LaBarge again. But it actually took me a few years to get away from being Robert Helberg. I mean, it was that I had lived that so much for 17 years and made myself that person. And you'll read about it in the book a couple of times. Things happen where I almost get caught as Robert Helberg in Minnesota. Just
uh-huh.
freak things, fishing or moving. I was moving some people, but it takes me a while to get to know myself again, to
Yeah,
know myself and know, well, this is what I love in life.
yeah,
Why didn't I ever do this? Why didn't I ever, do things like this and stuff? Why did I just, because I spent so much time doing drugs. See,
yeah, yeah. So tell me, um, what does freedom mean to you?
well, freedom means that lady sitting right there next to me, my house, you know, uh, the way I feel right now talking to you, you know, I have a life. I love my life. I love to play my music. I love to go work with my daughter. I love to go out and eat, and and enjoy and have money. What do you want to do, honey? I mean, what do you want to go buy? You can't do that kind of stuff when you're not free. And I don't mean
Yeah.
whether you're incarcerated or you're not free because you're going to spend the last penny you have on some booze or some drugs or whatever. Freedom is being free
Yeah.
to live your life and be yourself and not have any strings tied on you, and you don't have to worry about where you're going to get your next shot of dope.
Hmm. I can't even even imagine it. And I couldn't imagine when I was reading your book all the things
Grandson,
you went
hold
through.
my grandson, holding my
Yeah.
grandson, playing with my grandson, having him come in my hobby room, my daughter playing music with her. You know, that's what freedom is. It's your family, you know.
Yeah. That's a great answer. So I got one more question, a couple more questions, but the one I got to ask you is about the Hellberg name and how you found a person that connected us, and who's attorney at law Charles Hallberg from Cedar Rapids and Owine. Tell the story of how he found you.
Okay, well, he found me because I had some old recordings that I did in Anamosa. I was lucky enough when I got sent, I went to Anamosa prison in Iowa 3 different times. My uncle was a deputy warden there, by the way. That was the one thing I was lucky about. But I went there and they had a great music uh, department.
Yeah.
And the guy really liked me in the music department. And he had a nice little recording studio. Well, I recorded a lot of music there in 1981, 82, and early 80s. I recorded like 117 songs in there and that I wrote, in there. I record them and I send them to the Library of Congress and have them copyrighted. Well, eventually we go after that music. And at first first time my wife and I go after it was back in the mid 80s. And we misunderstood the whole thing and thought that it was going to be really expensive for me to get this music and I was going to have to pay so much money for each song. What we didn't realize was that when I recorded these songs, I did them as what was that called? Oh yeah, I did them as a piece of work, and I had forgot that I did that, and I did it for the specific reason. So, for example, I would do a cassette with so many songs on it and call it one piece of work.
Hmm.
Roger LaBarge, the original Riverboat Gambler. So all those songs were as one on one piece of work. So I end up finding out that I can get all this music for about 300 some dollars and from the Library of Congress. And I mean, this is years on down the line. This was not a long time ago. And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
I go after this work, and we get a hold of the Library of Congress, and I tell them, say, you want your stuff on cassettes, you want it on CDs, how do you want it? Well, I told them, well, we'll take them on CDs. So wasn't that the first way? Yeah. So they send me the CDs, and the music sounds like crap. It just
Hmm.
sounds terrible. And so what I find out is that they have taken my music and they had moved it from the Library of Congress into a storage area or something, and they said that it was damaged and they wasn't going to be able to record it where I could understand it and retrieve the music. They actually didn't even send it all to me. They said one of the CDs was completely destroyed and stuff. Well, I wasn't going to stand for that. I
Hmm.
because I had paid to have this stuff protected, put in
Hmm.
climate controlled places, and have it absolutely protected. And I wasn't going to stand for it if I didn't have to. And so what I did was I advertised on Facebook. I told the story about that on Facebook, saying I sure could use some help trying to retrieve my music from the Library of Congress, and they're trying to screw me around and stuff. Next thing you know, my lawyer, Charlie Hallberg, writes me, and helps me. and he
That's, yeah,
and
that's just an incredible story. So,
we had we go round and round to get that music. We have to send it 2 or 3 times, and he writes some letters and raises came for him. Finally, I get all of the music good, so I have it the way I recorded it.
it's just it took the right person. And what I love about it is, you put something on Facebook, he saw that and he contacted you to help you
Oh, I
to,
love Charlie. I
yeah.
love
You know
Diana. They helped me so much.
and I know, when he went to law school, one of his loves was always been music. He's a musician himself. And so copywriting was part of what he, wanted and wanted to do, wanted in some way to do. And this was his way to help you. And it's just crazy that that connection helped you get your music back from the Library of Congress. And it's a
117
mutual,
songs. Yeah.
yeah, and a mutual friend that we have. And he's the one that's responsible for sending your
The
book
book
to
to
me,
you. Yes.
you
Yes.
know, and otherwise, I wouldn't know who the heck you are, right? Way down here in
That's right.
Texas.
That's right.
Uh,
That's right.
uh, so one question I ask all my guests, Roger, is if there's one question I didn't ask you today that you wish that I would have asked, but I didn't, and I should have, what's that question? What should I have asked you? What should we have talked about? Can you think of anything?
Well,
Yeah, I got to tell you, you look a little bit like, that's a hard. And everyone I ask that question does the same thing. They go, well, I I don't know. I don't know.
I
But
suppose you could have asked, but I don't know how long my answer would have been, but you could ask me. So what do you want to do now, Roger?
okay, I want to know. Where do you
Well,
go from here?
well, what I'd like to do is get this book going all over the place. You know,
Okay,
get it out to people, and that's one of the things I want to do. I want to try to finish my recordings of all the music I wrote. That's a big thing for me. I have so much music that I want to try to get recorded. I'd like to re-record those 117 songs, and I have all this other stuff that I'm working. I have like 7 albums in my 16 track right now that are almost done that I'd like to finish, get done. I'd like to get the next book that I'm working on, which is called Freedom from Addiction, by the way. You
okay,
didn't, but I'd like to get that done. Um, and, and, but I not only want to do all that, but I want to spend as much time as I can while I'm here with my family, my friends, my loved ones, you. And,
yeah,
that really, that's everything. I want to fill my life with love and friends and family and get as much of that as I can every day.
yeah. Geez, well, that's a perfect answer. That that's perfect. So if people want to if they want to get your book, of course, as I mentioned, it's available on Amazon. If they want to hear you play, and I know you take the winter months off because the winter months can be, pretty tough traveling in Iowa and so forth, and this is your time to do more recording, and that's cool that you set this time. But how do they get the list of where you play? Do you have a website, Roger, that people can go
Well,
to?
we don't have a website. We probably should have one, but we don't have one. We're on Facebook. I'm
Okay,
on Facebook. Mandy's on Facebook. We have a music page on Facebook called Music by LaBarge,
okay,
and they can get on that, join that. They can just friend me, Roger LaBarge, and I'll before long here. I'll be posting what our schedule is for next year. And we
hmm
have a fan page called LaBarge Fan Page too. And our
okay,
post will be on there about where we're playing at.
okay,
Um, and we always try to play Cedar Rapids at least once a year. we come down
Mhm.
around that area. So everybody that wants to see us from there can come and see us. But we play a lot around up here, northern Iowa, lower Minnesota, Wisconsin over here where I live. And
Yeah, kind of the tri-states along the Mississippi,
yes,
the
yes.
river, and so forth. So if people want to hear you, you have CDs available. You can anything that you need to find on Roger, uh, uh, you can find at Facebook. Thank goodness
At
for
Facebook,
Facebook.
on my page, yes, you can come to me and get on my page. And a lot of our CDs, some of our CDs are extremely rare. You can't get them anymore. But we have a lot of CDs for sale now. Good
Yeah.
CDs that we've done in the last few years. So, and
Well,
you just get them from me. They're only $10 a piece. Where are you
uh
going to buy a CD for that nowadays?
yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, listen, this has been a pleasure of
my book's
meeting
on
you.
Amazon. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah. And so, listen, for those that are listening, grab a copy of the book. It'll read like nothing you've read before. I promise. Like I said, it's like a diary. And try to get a hold of some of Roger's music. The lyrics are beautiful. His music's beautiful. His daughter, Mandy's so talented as well. Plays with him, plays guitar, and is very talented. So, Roger, thank you so much for being with me today. It's been fantastic, and I hope I
Jim,
meet you
thanks,
in
man.
person.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Let's talk in person sometime, huh? Hang
I
tight.
can't wait, man. I can't wait.
Okay. Thanks everybody for listening. And listen, if you like this podcast, make sure to like it on YouTube and everywhere else. Do all the buttons, push the buttons, like it, and reach out to Roger. Friend him on Facebook. I know he'd like to hear from you. And we'll see you soon. Thanks again, Roger.
Thank you, Jim.